Okay, Mr. Chairman, we're ready. Eric isn't on the meeting at this point.
And is Mary Craig on?
She is.
All right, so I have three, but I don't see. So we didn't get Eric or. And Deb's.
Bruce, you okay to start? All set?
Yes, we have a quorum of yourself, Mary Craig, and Charlie.
Fine. Okay, so let's start.
And Mr. Chairman, let me read the required language if you don't mind.
That'd be great. It's on you. Thank you.
Before we open this meeting, this is the Board of Health, a remote participation meeting pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general law, chapter 30A, section 18, and the governor's March 23, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Yarmouth Board of Health is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance will be permitted. Every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access and participate in the proceedings as provided for in the order. Persons who would like to view this meeting while in progress may do so by watching via this virtual meeting via YouTube on the town's YouTube channel. We also post a recording of this meeting on the Town of Yarmouth website as soon as we are able. Please be patient as we work to overcome any technological challenges with the virtual meeting. To reduce confusion during the meeting, all participants of the virtual meeting are muted by the host. As participants are called upon to speak, they will be unmuted. Members of the public attending or viewing this meeting virtually will be able to use the raise hand button to identify themselves to the chair when called upon. The host will then unmute your audio. If you are dialed into the phone number provided, you can press *9 on your phone to indicate that you would like to speak. Please wait for the chairman to recognize you before speaking. In addition, public comments may be submitted via email to publiccomment@yarmouth.ma.us. This account will be monitored during the meeting by the host and provided to the chairman as applicable. All votes must be roll call votes. After a motion is made and there's a second, the chair will take the roll call vote. And Mr. Chairman, you need a roll call vote to enter a remote participation meeting. And it's all yours.
Very good. Hillard Bosque, the Board of Health, and welcome to the Yarmouth Board of Health meeting on May 18th, 2020. We'll start with attendance. Once again, here we go. Mary, are you there? Mary Craig?
Present.
Thank you. Eric? I don't believe he's on. Deborah? I don't believe she is as well. Charlie, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so we have a quorum. We have three people, including myself. And Director Murphy, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Great. Okay, let's start. Public comment. If there's anyone who's calling in or emailing in, perhaps the host can help me out here, and we're happy to listen.
Mr. Chairman, there is no emails on the public comment at yarmouth.ma.us email, and no participants are raising their hand at this point.
Okay, thanks for checking. So let's go to the second item, and that's the state request for railroad right-of-way herbicide spraying. And apparently the Board of Health needs to make a vote tonight on this. Director Murphy, why don't you tell us what this is all about?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the annual request from the railroad for spraying along the railroads, the herbicide spraying. Staff has reviewed the documents that was submitted and has drafted a letter for the Board of Health to review, discuss, and go forward with. The letter is similar to the last letter last year and the year before through discussions with the Board of Health, at which time the Board of Health was opposed to herbicide spraying within the right-of-ways due to environmental and public health concerns. Also this year, we added that if they stockpile railroad ties for use, that they should be covered. Last year and even the year before, we've had a couple of complaints when they drop off a lot of railroad ties. It has a lot of creosote odor to it that affected abutting houses and a neighborhood. So we're adding that to the Board of Health concerns on their spraying. So this is a letter of opposition, again, from the Board of Health for spraying herbicides on the railroads within town.
So I understand about voting about the spraying. Does the vote need to include something about the stockpile there?
We included in the Board of Health order.
Okay, all right. So,
And if approved by the board, we will sign it from the Health Department staff and forward it to the appropriate parties.
great, thank you. So, Board of Health members, some discussion perhaps. Any questions, thoughts?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Anyone?
Yes, this is Mary Craig. Can you hear me?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, I don't remember hearing anything about the railroad ties before this year.
This was new, Mary. In the past, we hadn't had a problem, but last year they did extra work on the railroad and they had dropped them off at a couple locations. And it took them a while, even after we called them and called DEP air pollution to ask them to be moved. The response time was very slow. They did not very cooperative to work with. So we wanted to include it in the letter that we did have a concern.
Good, because yeah, over 2,000 ties there for a year.
Yes.
That's not very responsive.
Mr. Chairman, we do have a participant in the meeting that's raised their hand. I'm not sure if it's perhaps for public comment or related to this issue. It's Andrew Menard.
Sure. Sure, we welcome people.
Okay, I'll promote her to speak.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Eric Weston. I'm using Hannah's account. I've been unable to connect effectively. Can you hear me?
Yes, Eric.
So I can view what's going on, but I don't know. I'm just having trouble connecting. So
Okay, just to the record, then it's Eric Weston, and he's joining us for the Board of Health meeting. He's on the board.
Eric,
Okay.
let me put you back and re-promote you again. I can rename you. Just hold on a second. Okay, Eric, you're in the meeting with your proper name now.
thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations with a name conversion. Okay, Eric, did you hear anything about the discussion or what we're on? What topic?
Yes, the railroad ties, creosote, herbicide application. I'm up to speed.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have any comments about it? Or?
Is there any way that I can view the meeting disclosures without losing the Zoom screen?
I don't have those enclosures to view on the screen.
That's okay. I mean, no real comments other than, that's obviously we want to avoid the public being exposed to creosote odors and avoid those types of complaints.
Yes, essentially, we need to vote on whether we're in support of or we're opposing the use of the herbicides, basically due to environmental reasons and health reasons. So we need to have a motion one way or another for the vote tonight. If anyone wants to make a motion.
I will make the motion. This is Mary Craig. I move that we approve the draft Board of Health letter regarding the railroad right-of-way herbicide spraying, saying that we do not approve of the spraying, and also we do not approve of their past practice of stockpiling railroad ties and not removing them in a timely manner.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second,
And just give your name for the record.
Eric.
Thank you. Okay. Any discussion? Any further discussion on this?
What are they going to use instead of spraying now? What options do they have? Are we trying to shut down the railroad now, or what are we doing?
We're just voicing our displeasure. They're going to use their herbicides anyway. We're just saying,
Options are pretty limited.
yeah,
Yeah.
No, I don't think we have a lot of choices. So we've done this before, and are you okay with that, Charlie? I mean, you can vote either way you want, but that's essentially all we're doing tonight is putting out a letter.
Well, if you're trying to shut down the railroad, I think that's kind of crazy, but, you know, I don't understand a lot of this. And as far as the railroad ties, yeah, if you're going to stockpile a few to rebuild the railroad, I think that's kind of nice. You know, is the stockpile still there?
Bruce?
The stockpile was finally removed.
Okay, it's removed. Are they building another one, or is the railroad already fixed now after they've used that 2,000?
I'm not sure how far along they repaired it.
Well, I'd check into that before I outlaw stockpiling railroad ties.
Well, I
You
don't
know,
think
these people are trying to run a business, and if it takes railroad ties to keep the railroad going, I think that sounds like a necessity to me.
Well, we would agree, and what we had recommended is that they be covered up so the creosote from the railroad ties would not go through the neighborhood where we're receiving complaints.
Well, how many complaints did you receive?
Probably from about 3 or 4 people several times.
I would not outlaw railroad tie stacks over 3 or 4 people.
Is there another option for a storage method? I mean, will the tarps over them really contain the odor?
I'd find out what they're doing next with them if they're going to keep doing this. They may have repaired the railroad and then not bring any more in for another 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'd ask him, you know, are you still remanufacturing railroad in Yarmouth? The only railroad we got in Yarmouth goes from the landfill out of town.
I guess the concern was that they were there for an extensive period of time before they were used. So that's certainly, if they need more, maybe it can be delivered closer in time to when they will actually be used for the tracks. Charlie, we're not trying to shut down the railroad. So, Mary, do you think there has to be any change in the motion?
no, I call for the vote.
Yep. Okay, good with that. So why don't we go ahead and vote? Just give your name and say aye if you're in favor or nay if you're voting against the motion.
Can I just make a point?
Sure.
Well, first of all, Mary, can you please repeat what the motion was?
I move that we approve the draft Board of Health letter dated May 12th, 2020 regarding the state request for the railroad right-of-way herbicide spraying, and which says that we disapprove of the spraying, and also that we disapprove of the practice of stockpiling railroad ties without covering them or removing them timely.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Is it possible during a vote? I mean, I personally, I don't think that there's too many options other than the herbicide application. I do understand if railroad ties need to be stored. I agree. It would be good if they could be stored there for as small amount of time as possible, but I feel like it's a bit of a two-part motion, so it's possible someone voting could agree on one portion of it and disagree on another. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, if someone disagrees with the whole motion, they should vote against it. You can certainly make a separate motion, but the motion's on the table. It's been seconded. There's been discussion on it. So I think we should vote on it. Someone, depending
And,
upon.
and excuse me, Hillard, the letter includes verbiage about the railroad ties as well as the herbicide spraying.
That's
So it's
correct.
not something that I added on to it.
Of course not.
The letter, which includes the herbicide spraying as well as the issue of the railroad ties being stockpiled.
Sure.
Absolutely.
I'm not suggesting you added anything.
No, I know, but I'm just saying that the motion approves the letter, which does include herbicide spraying as well as railroad tie stockpiling.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, why don't we see how the vote goes, and then we decide if
Yeah.
someone needs to make another motion and handle it differently. Hopefully, it's clear. We're basically voting on this letter that Director Murphy kind of put together, and that's all this is. So, Mary, which way do you vote?
Yay. Yes.
That's good. Charlie?
No.
Oh, God.
Is that a yes or a no, Charlie?
No.
Okay, thank you. Eric?
I'm voting nay.
Okay, and I'm voting yay. So we have a split vote, and so the motion is lost. So let's try this in another way. Yes, we do need to vote on it. So how do you want to change this? I think there's one person on the board who could maybe make a difference here. Maybe it's the language or how this motion is being made. I'm not sure. Director Murphy, you have any suggestions here by chance?
The right-of-way spraying is overseen by the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture that has the sole regulatory jurisdiction on the right-of-way spraying. So they're the ones that approve the herbicide. So it's really, they're just asking if the Board of Health has any concerns. They will still go ahead with the any of the spraying, but they do ask the towns what their concerns would be. We understand they have to keep the ballast area free of vegetation and so forth. We've asked if they can do as best they can in the vegetation management. That's more targeted application. It's just not a widespread application of herbicides. It's targeted application only. We've asked them if they can look into any cutting of vegetation on the side of the ballast, but we understand it's targeted application, limited herbicide targeted application, all overseen by the Department of Agriculture and Resources.
We visited this before with the power lines as well, this whole issue in general.
Correct.
Eric.
This is just right away this time.
Right. Eric, do you want to make another motion, perhaps?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just behind schedule here. I didn't have the documentation in front of me. So it was a little bit difficult. I'm able to view it now, so that's helpful.
Take your time and look at it.
I think I understand Mary's motion a little bit better at this point in time. So I don't know what to do, how to proceed at this point.
Well, do you think you're going to change your vote on it if we?
Well, I do. I do, because I'm viewing the wording in this the letter drafted by Carl.
Okay, so you think you could change your vote on this?
I do. I apologize.
Not, Eric, we're all in this together. It's not a problem. So Mary, maybe you could just say that you're submitting the same motion. Maybe we can make this a shorter deal here.
Okay, this is Mary Craig. I'm resubmitting the motion that I made previously to accept the draft letter dated May 12th.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? See, there's none. Okay, let's see who's voting which way here. Mary?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Charlie?
No.
I'm voting yes, so the motion passes and we're done. Okay. Congratulations, everyone. Here we go. Item here, number 3 on the agenda is an update. It's on the waste oil recycling issue at the landfill. Director Murphy has information for us.
Yes, this question was brought up at the last meeting, that the waste oil recycling containment area has been closed for a couple months. And that was due to some contamination in the sludge with other items that were being placed in the recycle area besides just waste oil. So what they've done is they've contracted with CYN, Sen Environmental Cleaning. They're going to have to come out and clean it. They might have to cut the top off, redo it. They're looking at different areas now. They've looked at what the funding costs would be over the last couple months, and the new updated letter that you have from the Roby White House from the Waste Management Superintendent states they're working with Sen Environmental, hope to have it back in service sometime soon. So they are aware of the issue. They seem to be in communications with the environmental company to get it serviced and back online.
Do we know what happened? You know, what went wrong here?
I think a few people were dumping other things besides waste oil in there. There is signage posted, waste oil only, but I think some other oils might have gone in there, whether that was could have been one of them. But other types of oils were put in there. This is the first time that's happened. I mean, it's been up at the landfill for a number of years. People have followed the signage. It's worked well until this last incident.
This is a vendor we've used over the years.
No, everything has been fine up until now.
So it's the same vendor. It's not like
yes.
we've changed vendors.
I believe it's the same vendor.
Eric, you initially brought that to my attention. I don't know how long ago when it started, but any other questions you have about it, Eric?
Not really. I mean, you know, the summer is upon us, boating season upon us. I think we need to get it fixed. You know, my concern has always been, where are people disposing of their waste oil? If the tank at the landfill is closed, I understand, you know, that there may be some staffing issues, staffing shortages, and it might be difficult to get someone down here to clean the tank, you know, due to the current health crisis. However, I do believe the tank's been out of commission since the end of January. So I don't know, could I ask that it remains, sort of an open thing on the agenda so we can get periodic updates on it, whether it be, I don't know, it's in certain increments. I just would like to know that it's being taken care of if possible.
That's fine. We can bring it up at each meeting until we get this accomplished. Yeah, I agree. People are emptying the oil, it's in their pan, and it's easy to throw it in the woods. So that's what we're trying to prevent from happening. I agree with you.
And if the issue is that cooking oil is getting into the waste oil, then I don't know if we should be looking at another type of oil disposal tank. I don't know if that's unreasonable or unfeasible, but if that puts the tank out of commission for 3-4 months, then that's a problem, in my opinion.
My experience, and this is Chuck, with waste oil, and I've had quite a bit over the years, the only thing that puts waste oil, that contaminates it and puts it out of business as far as is antifreeze. If you get antifreeze in it, things like that. Cooking oil burns the same as drain oil. All these oils burn basically the same. So they incinerate in waste oil burners the same. Depending upon the viscosity, all you have to do is change the settings on the machines, which they do, then they work fine. It's when people put antifreeze or water or anything like that that doesn't burn in with the oil. That's what happens.
But no, I appreciate that, Charlie. But it's not burned there. In other words, they're trucking it out or pumping it out of the tank. Isn't that what would take place?
They can only pump out so much. It probably leaves a couple inches on the bottom every time they pump the tank.
Why would there be a problem because of the antifreeze in the tank? In other words, wouldn't it get pumped out like everything else does?
No, the oil and water separate, obviously. Water sits on the bottom. When a lot of these people, like Sin Oil, when they pump a tank, they usually pump 4 inches off the bottom.
Okay.
So whatever's down 4 inches stays there.
Right.
All right. So that the water, when these tanks settle, and it does after a while, whatever you put in them, heavy stuff settles to the bottom. The water and the antifreeze go to the bottom too.
Right.
And they'll pump the oil off, but the bottom 4 or 5 inches or even more after a while can turn into a real heavy sludge. That's what's in the tank now.
Okay.
All right.
So
and this is usually caused by people trying to get rid of antifreeze because they got no place to put it. All right. So they just dump it in with the drain oil. So in my experience, and I've been using waste oil heaters over here since 1987. I had the first one in town. My experience with customers bringing me drain oil is I've had a few customers, there's antifreeze in there too, because they don't know any better. And they're looking to get rid of it. That's as simple as it is. So I have separators here, so I check everything that anybody brings me before it goes into my tanks. So the only thing that'll stop this from happening again is somebody that can check it when it's transferred. In other words, be there when you watch these people pour it in.
Right.
That's the only way you...
You mean they need to really close the door there at the gate to it?
Well, if somebody wants to dump 5 gallons of drain oil in that tank, somebody's going to have to stand there and watch it because they're dumping more than drain oil. That's obviously what happened to it.
Okay.
Hillary,
Bruce,
this is Mary. I have a question. So
Sure.
how do you dispose of antifreeze? Charlie, how do you dispose of antifreeze properly?
Well, properly, I found a way, if I let it sit long enough, it separates. And all the contamination that's in it, it came out of a cooling system or something, settles to the bottom like sludge. Actually, it looks like liquid rust. And I let it separate for 4 or 5 months. And then after that, it's reconstitute. You can use it again. You got all the heavy stuff out of it, all right? So you end up out of a gallon, you might have 1/4 of an inch of rusty-looking mud in the bottom of it. That's it. And then I use the antifreeze again.
Isn't there a waste antifreeze?
They have systems, yes. They have systems for recycling if you use it large amounts, yes. You know,
But at the
people that are in the
landfill.
business. I beg your pardon?
At the landfill, isn't there a separate tank for antifreeze, for waste antifreeze?
I don't know. I haven't been in the landfill for 20 years, so I couldn't tell you.
Okay. Certainly, Charlie, you have a lot more sophistication or knowledge about this.
Well, that's because I've been in the business for 50 years.
Yeah.
So, the other thing, there is one other thing that really screws up drain oil, and that's brake fluid.
Hmm.
If there's any brake fluid in it at all, it'll shut one of these burners down in the blink of an eye.
Okay. Director Murphy, perhaps you can pass this information on to Carl and he can speak over the DPW a little bit.
Will do.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Bruce.
Okay, and we'll discuss it at the next meeting. So, number 4, we have a discussion here, proposed solar farm, and it's saying landfill transfer station workshop road. Director Murphy, tell us what's up.
Yes, board members, chairman and board members. We have a request for a solar panel, small solar panel farm area up at the landfill solid waste facility, septic treatment plant area. It goes back to, there's an overhead picture of where it is right here that you can take a look at. I don't really have a pointer, but in the middle of the screen, you can see the railroad tracks and the solid waste transfer facility, which the Board of Health approved back in November of 1987 to allow that area to be constructed. That had expanded the current landfill area we had to be allowed to be north of the railroad tracks. So the Board of Health approved that in 1987 and issued conditions on its construction and operation, which I included in the board's packet of the 37 conditions for operation. One of the points for the construction of the solid waste transfer facility was a buffer zone around the facility. And that buffer zone was going to be 100 feet on the north side, which is the highway side. And the conditions that the buffer zone would have to be left in the natural state. The request the board has before them for discussion tonight is the septic treatment facility that uses a considerable amount of electricity wishes to place solar panels up there for their facility and possibly other areas in town. So it's really not tied into the solid waste transfer facility, possibly construction and operation. And I just wanted the board to get some background on this tonight. We do have Assistant Town Administrator Rich Bellevue here for discussion and just to go over it and have the board familiar with this, whether the board feels comfortable going forward tonight, or we can place it on the next Board of Health agenda as we get more information. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rich for a background presentation.
Mr. Chairman, we do have representatives from CVEC who helped the town. There's a lot of work across the Cape on the solar PV projects with many of the towns. In a participant, Liz Argo, and also representatives from the developer DSD that are available to speak to the project as well. And if they raise their hand, or I'll invite them in after we go through our discussion. But I just want to follow through with Bruce's comments on the background. I will share that map again. This is a part of a larger town effort to improve municipal vulnerability preparedness and to be able to island certain key facilities, the septic treatment plant and transfer station among them, and also our fire station 3 and our new DPW facility are going to be part of this larger project. There are other areas in town being considered for solar, and it's not just solar, it's also battery backup that would allow us to be energy independent for up to 14 days. The tie-in with the septic plant, other than the fact that it's on the site, is that it also has a large electric account, which we would tie into that account and to facilitate it being behind the meter, so to speak. Originally, from the town's position, when we reviewed the site assignment and the conditions, there was some language in, I think it was condition 34, talking about these requirements for setbacks being applicable to the transfer station facility buildings or a part of its operation. And we didn't consider this to be a transfer station facility or part of its operation. It's a separate thing. And so I guess our sense was perhaps these requirements for setback and buffer zones did not apply, but we didn't want to presume that position on behalf of the Board of Health, but that's how we viewed it at the time, and now that's why that's in front of you. And if you're comfortable with that assessment, then what happens is this becomes part of the building commissioner's responsibility to review for a site plan review and issuing of permits. As laid out, what you saw on the screen there was a ground mount solar PV array that had anywhere between 30 and 50 foot setback. Would go to the edge of just about the edge of the pavement at that site at the property line. I mean, 100-foot line, I should say. But it's anywhere between 30 to 50 feet from the property line. And also, as you saw on the map, despite there's also a substantial buffer, which at the moment is there for the state right away in the state highway of almost 100 feet, I believe it was. And then as far as the placement, you're probably familiar, many of you are probably familiar with the site. There is a bit of a incline and decline. So a lot of these ground mount solar PV panels are in that valley, so to speak. And so there's a little bit of hill between the highway and these, which would prevent some, not entirely, but be some protection from view from the road. And in talking to the development team, that we are talking about, and then speaking to the building commissioner, would likely be a condition of the site plan review as the implementation of replacement of some trees to provide for a screen, if to the extent there would be trees that would be cleared. So I guess what we're really asking here, and we understand this might take more than just tonight, but is if this is considered part of the transfer station facility or its operation, and if it's not, just that you're blessing that we move this forward through the site plan review with the building department.
I must admit, I didn't really understand. One of the issues was whether it was being considered part of the transfer station as one issue here prior to tonight's meeting. So that's helpful. I guess I was looking more about the issue of the property line and the distance and so on. That's sort of how I was looking at this. Anyone on the board have some questions here?
Is this something the town's funding or what?
So this is a part of our larger townwide effort. This particular project is not funded directly by the town. It was a request for proposal that was sent out through CVAC, and we had a competitive process and selected this developer for this particular project at this location. And it's changed since the original design, but don't hold me to it. I don't want to talk out of school, but we're talking originally it was up to $250,000 of value of electricity savings to the town, which would be the financial impact, the budgetary savings to the town, which was part of the ongoing wastewater funding plan. At this point, the project's been scaled back, so it wouldn't be quite that financially attractive, but probably in the order of magnitude of approximately half of that is what our expectation was at this point. And that was part of the wastewater funding plan. And then to the extent we do this in other locations, like I mentioned at Fire Station 3, which wouldn't be necessarily on the ground, it could be on the roof. And certainly the new DPW facility is being designed for rooftop solar. Those would also be part of that plan. So it's a part of a larger effort, which does have health implications as far as wastewater remediation as well.
Rich, I have a question. Why scale back?
Oh, I'm sorry. How was it scaled back? Originally,
No,
it was
why was it scaled back?
just what's able to be done financially and at the site, given the site size and limitations. And
Okay,
so, originally it was about a 1 megawatt system, and as I understand it now, we're about half of that.
okay, thank you.
Charlie, you're about to say something.
Yeah, I'm still confused. And now you said $250,000 it would save the town in electricity. Am I correct in that?
That was based on the original design as a 1 megawatt system. So now it's
Okay, now it's scaled back. So what's it going to do?
about half of that, 125.
Okay, so you take it, and is that annual savings or overall what?
That would have been annual electricity savings. Of course, that changes with the price of electricity, so there's never any guarantee, but that's part of the contract that we get with the developer. There's a buyback of energy, things like that.
And I'm not sure I really understand. Charlie had asked who's funding the project. Can you just repeat that portion of the answer again?
Well, maybe, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I'll ask Liz Argo to come in.
Sure.
Hey, Liz,
Can-
you're in the meeting.
Can you hear me?
We
Rich?
can hear you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So what CVIC does for the towns, and this is what we've been doing since 2007, package bundles of potential PV projects and bring them to the market. We go forward with what are called power purchase agreements, whereby a developer is the owner and maintenance provider of the solar facilities, and we buy the power. And we pass it through to the towns. And there is a cost, and basically there's something called net metering credits and the avoidance of having to buy power from Eversource. And against that, there is a slight cost. So what we're looking at in the about $150,000 that the town of Yarmouth would get it in terms of savings every year is the difference between the cost of power and the fee to the developer for owning and maintaining the project.
Eric, does that answer your question?
It does.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
there was one point, because even though it may not be in the treatment, the trash conditions, solid waste transfer facility, it is a buffer. However, even though they're going to be into the buffer area somewhat, a possible condition the Board of Health could be discussing is planting some trees around the outside of the north side of the solar area. That would be similar to the trees that were planted. If you looked at Mattakees Middle School, to the left, there's a solar farm between both schools, the Mattakees Middle School and ME Small School. There's a solar area and trees were planted around it. Even though we're taking some trees down for this to go in, they're pretty thin pine trees where I think a row of solid trees might be better, either cutting sound down from the facility or leaving a little bit more of a buffer that was originally there could be discussed. And that would just be on the one side, not obviously all the sides, and it would be on the back side of the solar area. So it wouldn't affect any of the sun screening.
If it goes that far, we probably want to look at the details of that. Only I looked at the other site and the plantings were pretty limited at the site you sent us to. I took a look, so it reaches
That's
that point.
spaced out. Obviously, they'll be growing in.
Right.
They could be spaced a little bit closer together depending on what type of trees they're going to plant and specs. I don't know if Rich has any background on from the last facility going in. But that would be something the board could ask for along the north side. I don't think it goes into the hillside on the more of the east side, but I think it's more of northwest.
Yeah, Liz Argo has some comments, I think, regarding the trees and the last project. Liz?
Yeah, so what we generally use is arborvitae for the kind of view shed, disguising the solar panels from views. We do have to be cognizant of the 30-foot setback though, of course. So what we are fighting is the total footprint that is available. And when we put in trees, unless we put in trees outside of the 30-foot setback, then we've cut into the footprint for the solar array. And there will come a point where it's no longer a real array and it doesn't make sense to install it. So that's what we're sort of up against.
And again, right, wrong, or indifferent, our position coming in was that we weren't sure that this even applied to the site assignment because it wasn't part of the transfer station or its operation. I know there's some, and Director Murphy pointed out the buffer regarding natural vegetation, and my reading of it was it seemed clear to me that it was talking about if these setbacks were required. And I guess I would have said, well, it's not required because it's not part of the transfer station buildings or its operation. So, and maybe that's a bit of a semantics, but that's how I looked at it when we started looking into this. And so that's really what's before you today. And if you don't have that view and feel comfortable of having a site plan review with the building commissioner to make sure that the appropriate screening and trees are implemented as part of that review, then what we'd have to do is have a full public hearing and ask for the request for adjustment of the site assignment conditions.
This is Mary Craig. My only concern is that in the materials that we received prior to the meeting, there was nothing that explained condition 34 other than what was in your email, Rich. So what you showed up on the screen, I did not have in my hand before the meeting to kind of give me more background about why we were even being involved and what had happened way in the past by the Board of Health.
Yeah, I didn't put the packet together. Bruce, I'm actually relatively near Bruce, and he seemed to thought it should have been included, but.
And I guess.
But to your point of why you would even be involved is, I guess that's my point as well. I'm not sure that you ought to be, but there's somebody's got to make the decision, I guess, that, that condition 34 isn't applicable, and, nobody feels comfortable doing it by themselves, I guess, just saying that you're right, that this isn't part of the transfer station and isn't part of its operation, and therefore it's just a regular submittal to the building department.
Can I ask, just for clarification, what exactly is located there? And are you able to put that map up again? Just
Yeah. I'll put it up and I'll walk you through it.
Thank you.
So this is the site, and the transfer station is down here, which is blocked out by that little insert. Here's the rail line, and it goes through the building here. This is a septic treatment plant up a little further north. And then, of course, here's the highway and the off-ramp. And so in between there, we looked at this whole site, and this whole site is part of the Cape Cod Energy Park concept that you might have heard about. And those are types of things that might be coming in front of you in the future. So as part of that concept, we carved out this, what we called parcel E. It's not really a parcel, it's just part of the property. And that ran along the north side of the property from the west property line towards the east, kind of curving where the off-ramp is. And what's being proposed is about 0.5 megawatt of ground mount solar in this location. And you can't see it perfectly, but the setbacks lines are kind of indicated here on the left. The 100-foot setback is pretty much just off the pavement. The property line is the furthest back. That's this white line. And then 30 feet of setback is the first black line, which has this little purple dotted area on it. And then 50 feet shows where 50 feet is, and where this overlay of where the panels would be kind of crosses that 50 foot, so you don't see it that well. And so at some spots, it's not quite up to the 30-foot setback, which is the normal zoning requirement for this location. And then some spots, it's pretty close or right at the 30 feet line. And so
that's a treatment plant there?
Right.
What is that fed by? What buildings, or where does that come from? Just for my own knowledge.
So the treatment plant is septic treatment plant is tanker trucks drop off, and it gets processed. This is the headquarters, what we call the headquarters building. There's a big water tank over here on the east, and there are solar panels on top of that water tank right now. Yeah, I call it a water tower. I'm sorry, a storage tank. I'm sorry. And then this building here really isn't used, but this would be the future site. If you've heard about the potential for an anaerobic digester, it would be kind of in this area. But we're not really talking about that tonight. But this building largely isn't used at all. So most of it is all in this facility over here.
Okay.
And so just to bring this back home to why we're in front of you. So this whole site was a subject of a site assignment back, as Bruce said, I think it was 1987, for the transfer station, which said that if you were to build a transfer station building or a part of its transfer station operation somewhere on this site, that you should have a 100-foot setback. Yeah, they said, among other things. And so my position when reading that, as I read through the conditions, was, well, this isn't part of the transfer station or its operation, and isn't subject. We were not trying to put the transfer station within 100 feet. We're trying to put something totally different, solar panels. It could be a greenhouse. It could be something else. And so I didn't interpret that to mean that it was subject to that 100-foot setback, because I wasn't putting the transfer station there. And so here we are. It's came in front of Bruce, and we have this discussion about whether it should be subject to that setback or not. I didn't contemplate that it would be coming in, and we just need some direction. The easy direction, if you're inclined to do so, would be that you're correct. And this goes to the building commissioner for a site plan review and make sure it meets all zoning requirements, which would happen anyway. If you don't agree with that, then the path would be, we'd have the developer in front of you and apply for a modification of the site assignment.
I have a question. This is Mary Craig. The original 100-foot setback, what was the purpose of that? What was the intent? What was that accomplishing?
I believe at that time, it was accomplishing a couple points. One is during the public comments from some of the neighbors back at that point in time was concerned with odors. So even though there was going to be odor control within both facilities, they wanted to make sure that there was a nice buffer that would help prevent any of the odors, help with any noise control, and just general a buffer, looking at the facility. So, there is some questions on is it or not included? I mean, that could be something that we could ask for clarification with town council on. We are meeting with council tomorrow, so that could be a question that we could bring up for discussion and bring it back to our next board meeting also. I know this is a lot of material that was distributed to the board to look at from last week. There's a lot of little things going on here, so whatever the board feels most comfortable with.
I would feel comfortable with the interpretation that the setback requirements for the facility or parts of its operation do not apply to the installation of solar panels because of the purpose of those setback requirements. The solar panels are not going to cause odor. They're not going to cause noise. I suppose that there could be some visual aesthetic considerations, but Rich had already mentioned replacing trees that might have to be taken down. And Bruce, you mentioned also some sort of screening with something like arborvitae that Hillard will fill out over time, although it did look pretty sparse when I looked at Matakee's project. So personally, I would be willing to go ahead tonight and say that I have no concern about condition 34 applying to this project installing solar panels.
I happen to agree with you. Was there any issue about number 12 that you had marked, Bruce? It was about the just the buffer areas need to be left alone. I mean, for some reason, I don't know if that contradicts anything else here.
Well, actually, Hillard, Bruce and I did speak to that, and I think he thought I had a good point. I won't speak for him, but certainly number 12 says what it says and it applies, but it also says somewhere on, actually I can bring it up. It says as required. And it's not required because it's not part of the plant or its operation. Right. So, I mean, it gets to be a bit of a word soup here, but what I try to do is, what are we talking about here and what are we trying to do?
Right.
This isn't really anything onerous. So it says all buffer areas as required. And the buffer areas are required for the transfer station or part of its operation. So we can go around in circles all day reading some of these things.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't want to be getting in the way and slowing the process of putting, the panels up. That's just how I feel. So I agree with you, Mary.
My only concern is with regard to odor, because I know that in the summer months when you get off exit 8, you certainly do, or I have anyway, experienced some odor coming from the treatment facility there. But I am confident that some new plantings could help provide, additional buffer to sort of screen off visually and screen off the odors that I realize odors aren't going to be generated by the the solar panels.
Well, the odor control at the plant needs some work, and that's part of this. To the extent we can utilize this funding to do such work, that would probably do a lot more than having the buffer of trees.
Right.
Everyone have a full understanding of everything? I think, Rich, that was very helpful. I appreciate it. So, want to see if a vote can come out of this. Would someone make a motion and we can move along on the agenda?
I move that the Board of Health approve the building commissioner's plan to move forward with site plan review as pertains to the solar facility at, I don't have the location here in front of me.
50 Workshop Road.
Thank you, Rich.
50 Workshop Road, thank you.
I second.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing here
One
none.
question, Mr. Chairman, would you want to include the, any tree planting in this?
Sure. Eric, that'd be a good one for you to add on if you want to go with the giant arborvitae. That sounds good.
Well, I suppose we could discuss varieties at a later date, but okay, so should reword the motion? Is that?
Well, just put an addendum. We don't have to be too formal here. Just add on to the motion. Okay.
Let's see.
Generic about, we have maybe some oversight.
We could offer something perhaps that requesting the building commissioner to include appropriate screening in his site plan review.
Wonderful.
Okay. Mary, you okay with seconding that?
I still second it, yes.
Okay, so any other discussion? Director Murphy, you're okay with this?
Sounds fine.
Good, okay.
Charlie, you good?
So why don't we vote? Mary, how are you voting on this?
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm voting yes. That's unanimous. Okay, good. We got this done tonight and didn't have to delay it. Good. Rich, you good with this now? Okay.
Well, great, thank you.
Yeah, okay. So number 5 here. So we've got Board of Health actions and enforcements. And these are possible votes is what it said. And there are 4 items that are listed in order. First is Governor's orders of May 18th, 2020, which is today. Board of Health emergency order to protect the public, April 1st, 2020. The third item list is beach openings, and the last is the beach water testing. Director Murphy, can you give us a little more information about what we're discussing tonight or possibly voting on?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As most of you are aware, the governor came out with his first phase of reopening businesses. So we had a Department of Public Health conference call this morning prior to the governor's news conference at 11 o'clock today. One of the areas in the phase 1 opening is the beaches. And the governor came out with a plan to open the beaches on May 25th with conditions. In the board's packet was the proposed conditions from last week that was developed by the task force on the Cape and forwarded to the governor's council for review and their consideration. And as part of that, it's changed a little bit quite a bit from what the original draft was to the governor's orders that came out today, which I did forward the update to each of the board members this afternoon, brought a copy back over to Charlie. What I can do is highlight a couple of the changes, and then we have Jeff Colby from DPW that can talk about what DPW will be doing to follow implementation of the governor's orders for the beaches, along with Pat Armstrong on what will be opening the beaches with the guards and so forth. So with just the brief overview of the changes is, one is there's no requirement on blocking off the parking lot. That was one that had been discussed in the past, that maybe they needed to reduce the size of parking, or put cones in every other space. So that's been taken out. So that's just, that will be a lot easier to work with, is just the beach manager will just be looking at managing the area, so to limit beach capacity. So that's a lot more workable. And I think this whole governor's beach opening guidelines for managers is a lot more workable than what we saw last week. I think it gives a little bit more flexibility to the towns. So that's one area. The other area was on picnic tables and beaches. They were not going to be allowed, but in this new governor's orders, they will be allowed to continue. So that's a plus. The bathroom will be allowed to be opening with appropriate social distancing and markings, which is a thing they're working on. The outdoor showers will be allowed. And some of the organized games would also be allowed if the town wished to go in that direction. So it gives a little bit more flexibility to the town. It does show, you still need social distancing, masks. You do need to have a 6-foot area that should be around the lifeguard stations. So it gives the lifeguards able to concentrate on the water and not the people around them. And the idea of 12 feet between towels and blankets is only a recommendation. So I think there's a lot of flexibility that the governor allowed for the opening the beaches on Monday, May 25th. So I think with that, if we could hear from both Jeff and Pat for an update to the board would probably be helpful right now.
Okay. Who's on?
Yeah, this is Jeff Colby from the DPW. I'm happy to talk a little bit about our responsibilities, and typically what falls under parks in DPW is the parking, the restroom cleaning, the physical facilities, if you will, the beach raking, that type of thing. And as Bruce had mentioned, the guidance from the governor gives us a lot of flexibility to have operations that are very similar to what we've had in the past for the beaches. So that's the good news from our standpoint, something that we can easily staff and coordinate, and we're comfortable doing so. What I would highlight for this year is that we'll need to have a high level of communication between the lifeguards and the park supervisors. There will be a park supervisor that is on site every day, 7 days a week. We have two very competent, experienced site supervisors. One is Dave Carlson, the other is Kevin Buckland, and they split their time so that there is one on duty every day, and they will coordinate with the lifeguards with regards to the beach occupancy to make sure that at the point where we feel like it's maximized, that we're able to cut off the entry and the parking would be limited. We're thankful that we don't need to block off every other space, as Bruce mentioned, which was a potential consideration in a previous draft, but we do have the ability with our gate attendants to cut off access once the maximum density at the beaches has been reached. So we're comfortable with that communication between the lifeguards and our supervisors. With the other component that I'd like to mention, that is the cleaning regiment. It says in the governor's guidance that there will be daily staff cleaning, which we're already prepared to do, and we do anyway, and then a weekly deep disinfection. and we will certainly be doing that. That's another level. We haven't, prior to the COVID-19 dealt with a deep disinfection, but that will be happening now, consistent with the governor's guidance on a weekly basis. And then, of course, the maximizing the whole thing, I mean, underlying the whole thing is the 6-foot social distancing requirement. And we do have electronic message boards out there. And we also have a standard sign that we've been working on with regards to the beach signs and park signs. We'd like to have a sign that is very consistent with what is throughout Yarmouth at the beaches as well as the parks. And so there's a standard sign we've been working on that indicates keeping your distance 6 feet apart, wearing a mask when social distancing is not possible, and avoiding touching, like handshaking and things of that nature, and crowds. And so that's what we're looking at as far as overview for Public Works. I know that Pat has some additional components associated with the beachside activities.
Thank you, Jeff. Mr. Chairman and Bruce and members of the Board of Health, we've been in an interesting situation where we've been hurrying up and waiting. And we've been thinking about all sorts of contingencies and different actions. And today the governor sent down their phase 1 instructions, and we feel that they can be interpreted and met here in the town with a straight face and comfortable with how we address them. The lifeguards are the only thing that's left under the auspice of the Recreation Division. All others, as Jeff explained, all of the duties and responsibilities fall under DPW, but that doesn't really matter because our team is really strong and they've worked together for years, and they have good communication through radios and other, both in the vehicles that they travel in and also with the booth attendants. So we have the capacity to coordinate the loading of the beach area and the concern if when it gets full with the manager from the Parks Department, and the guards can handle that. Our guards are primarily 17 to 21, and to have them dealing with a lot of enforcement issues will be disconcerting at best. So we're focusing on training them about education. And we want people to feel comfortable and welcome here. And if we see something that's a concern, we want a way to, if we need to approach it, to be very positive. And, I'm not sure you're aware, these are the rules. We understand that you probably are. Just this is our interpretation kind of thing. And we need some time to train the kids to do that. And I call them kids, but don't they have a huge responsibility, not only of public safety for swimming issues, but the sharks are still out there. And last year they were a big issue, weren't they? And they haven't gone away with the pandemic. So the Rec Commission has weighed in. They have a couple of concerns they'll bring to the Board of Selectmen for their discussion. We'll leave it up to you and the board of how you want us to operate, but we probably have presently about 30 guards in place that we can activate, but we're not comfortable activating for Memorial Day weekend or even May 25th because of all these new COVID issues, first aid training, hands-on first aid, having to use valve masks now, no more CPR mouth to mouth, the hand washing, the sanitation of all the equipment, the switching of the staff from the lifeguard towers to the rescue boards to whose torp is whose. We've got some training to do to make sure that we're keeping the staff safe. So we're going to suggest that our people start on the 16th of June, which is not unusual to have them start on weekends only before we go full time later on in June. We would just be missing Memorial Day weekend in the first 2 weekends of June. Again, between you and the Board of Selectmen, however you decide to go with that, we feel we shouldn't put them out there unprepared, especially due to their age and lack of experience in the world. And we hope that you agree with that and know that when people buy a beach sticker, it's to park and it's not to have restrooms or concessions or lifeguards or other things. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, sir. Any questions, we'll be happy to answer.
Pat, this is Mary.
A lot of effort has gone into this, so I appreciate it.
Hi, Mary.
Hi. I just have a question about the beach supervisors. In this document from the governor, it talks about beach managers.
Mhm.
Are your beach supervisors the equivalent of the beach managers in the document?
I believe that Jeff and I are what the state was thinking of in terms of beach managers, and we're using our chain of command to train our people appropriately.
So the beach supervisors, do they rotate amongst the beaches? How do they supervise the beaches?
Well, there are, on the recreation side, I have three. One works 4 days a week, just in the mornings, and does training with the lifeguards to keep their certifications up in CPR, first aid, AED training, and now the valve mask. And the other two are on separately 2 days apiece, and then together 3 days. And they cover both the north side and south side of town. So we go from Bass River Beach, now Smugglers, to Bass Hole. And we check on the guards and respond to issues or any kind of rescues and that sort of thing. And both of these men, presently, they're men who are here on a 5-day-a-week, sometimes 6-day-a-week basis, if they choose to, are one's an educator, about to retire, and is the head of Suffolk University, Suffolk boarding school facilities and athletics. So he went to college with me, so I'm pretty comfortable with David on that one. And the other has both of his children were beach directors and water safety instructors, and he has retired down here and is very familiar with our system, and we're pretty comfortable with him. And they actually would be reporting to our full-time staff. Those two are seasonals, Mary, and they would be reporting to our full-time staff of Dave Carlson and Kevin Buckland, who are DPW employees who are with us year-round and are very competent and capable men and know our system well. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. To me, it seems like a lot of responsibility and work for few people. But maybe I'm being pessimistic, and maybe the summer's going to go fine and there won't be a lot of issues and things that have to be dealt with.
I think it'll be both. I think some people will be thrilled and happy to do everything in compliance and want to keep things open. And I think there'll be others who will push against it, because that's just the human nature and where we are in the world. And we want to make sure that how we approach those people is a positive, educational, and represents the town of Yarmouth and our welcoming philosophy for our visitors.
Right. Thank you.
I agree, Mary. If you just think about what happened in Mashpee, talking about on Mother's Day, fighting over ice cream, closing because yelling obscenities at the employees. And this is not when it's 85 degrees sunny beach day with maybe some alcohol, unfortunately, involved. It's a bit different. So, you know, our staff is very familiar with the present system, but the beaches are going to be quite different this year. I'm concerned about their own safety, the people in the town.
And Mr. Chairman, I agree. And Amy Howell, the Assistant Recreation Director, and myself, we have great trepidation about a number of things, and we don't know. We certainly can envision and presume, but we won't know till we get there. So what we want is at least to take the time we have available between now and that June 13th date to really look at what we're doing and make sure that we train them as best we can, and make sure that the equipment is in good condition, so when they need us, that radio is not going to fail. And make sure that the cars are in good position so that if they need us and we're on 28, we can get to the Bass Hole as fast as possible. And to have good communication with our police department and other DNR and other enforcements in case we need their support. But we won't put our young people in danger. And if we feel there's a situation where it's not safe, I know that the chairman of the Rec Commission is saying that she will have them pulled. One in particular, of course, is Bass Hole, right? As we look at the Bass Hole, no parking attended, open parking, 4th of July, it goes down to Center Street, almost to 6A. That can't happen. We can't leave 3 guards on the guard chair and not have some controls behind them that they can't even see in the parking lot, and then ask them to control, the amount of people on the beach, and also, the tidal shifts that are happening as well. So we're gonna maybe need to ask permission to maybe make that into a resident-only beach for this summer, or until we get to a point where we can open it up, so it's not just wide open, and we have at least some controls of in and out that gives us a chance to support the guards who are there, because we have over 100 rescues there a year. That's a very dangerous area. And if you've been there since the winter, you'll see that the sandbar is shifted and the currents are strong, and people insist on parking at the Bass Hole free to walk over to Chapin because they don't want to go to Denison Bay. So we know it's there. We know it's been a historic place and things have happened there that way for years, but it's not normal. And maybe it's time to make a change, at least in the short term, to protect the young people who are there, to protect the visitors and our residents.
Yeah, at
I
high tide,
that.
the dry sand there at high tide is probably down 80%.
Right.
Amen.
Mhm.
We know, and we've seen it on the 4th of July. Anyone who's a North Sider and has driven down that road and seen people parked on both sides, even with the police notices and the signage and all of Jeff's work last year to create some shoulders for people to walk. That is the closest thing to the Wild West that we still have left, and I don't think we can leave it that way. I think we really need to address that concern with at least, enough clarity for the community so that we don't overload the beach. The lifeguards can't tell people they can't come. They're not in the parking lot. They're not anywhere. We close the gate, then they're parking illegally on the road, and the police or another deputized enforcement group has the ability to ticket those cars and maybe have an impact, but we can't leave it to the guards to do that.
Any thought along the lines of drop-offs? In other words, where a car drops 6 people off, the car doesn't need to park. What happens in those situations?
Well, if they come walking down the street and we don't see the drop off and the gate is closed, we can't stop them.
Right.
And again, one booth attendant or 3 guards in the chair that are out there, one on a board and one in the chair and one on the point, depending on the tide shift, aren't going to be able to stop them either. So people are going to have to use common sense. And as long as we've done what we can, then we're just going to have to let people make their choices. And if they can't self-regulate, then the option is left to you and the Board of Selectmen to close down that area for access because people can't self-regulate. But I don't think it's what any of us want to see happen. And we certainly want to say yes, yes, and not no. But, if you drop off on the turn or even at Obbs Road, pull in, drop people off and pull out, they're going to be walking in. We
Right.
can't see them.
I know one selectman had mentioned about health agents and monitoring the beach. Where did that go? Is that being discussed, or I just wouldn't, obviously you want to see the health department staff, they don't have the training or the staff to be monitoring in some way.
Bruce, I defer that to you for a response.
Well, there'll be a beach manager and a supervisor at the facilities. Obviously, if they start to see a large social gathering, that would be brought to their attention. It's obviously, it could be the police also would be in assistance. So I guess we'd have to play it as we go. We hope people are going to abide by the rules, but we know that not always the case. But there is a manager at each of the locations, so hopefully they can take the first step of either a warning or talking to people before we have to take the next step.
But you're saying the manager, though, is the lifeguard?
No.
No. But there's not a manager at every
Manager is the
location.
park department, full-time year-round employee that oversees everything but the lifeguards. And in this situation, we're going to work cooperatively with the
Right.
lifeguards as well. Right, Jeff?
Yeah, that's correct. But just to be clear, that's only one person on each day. We'll make sure that all of the staff has their cell phone numbers, radio communications. We're going to look to ramp up as well. So, there's going to be ways to communicate, but it is a one supervisor on each day. They do overlap since they're both 5-day-a-week employees. So there will be days when there's two on, but those are the people that I was referring to as far as supervisors. There's not one at each location, but they cover all the locations.
Right. And as an assistant director, Amy Howell, who's here, will partner with them as well. We don't know yet what the directives are going to be for opening of day camps and some of the other programming that we do, and she has those responsibilities as well. The Recreation Department has one full-time directorial position as Amy Howell, the assistant director, and then a secretary under admin. So, she's a 40-hour-a-week person. Now we can switch her to cover, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and she takes Wednesday, Thursday off. And we'll look at that hopefully so that there'll be two supervisors on a daily basis. And these two seasonal people who are adult, responsible, well-trained, educated people that we trusted, and they've been with us for a few years.
I certainly support your not putting all of this into effect until the second week in June, after you have comfortably trained the lifeguards for their expanded role during this coronavirus pandemic.
Thank you, Mary. I think that's a wise choice.
This is Eric. Can you speak to the regulations regarding the restrooms a little bit? I'm reading in phase 1. I could have missed it. Did you speak at all about, what the timeline looks like for restrooms? And I see all of this on the packet, but I'm just wondering, if you have anything to, will they remain closed for now? Is that the protocol?
No, we're looking to keep the restrooms open. If we didn't have the restrooms open, we'd have to look at porta potty option. And so we feel that the restrooms that we have at the facilities is the best way to go.
I agree.
The criteria was dealing with the cleaning as well as the visual indications for the 6-foot social distancing separation. So those are the types of things that we'll be looking to implement in the restrooms.
Okay, great. Thank you.
What's your feeling on the organized games, whether or not that will take place or should take place?
It currently would be allowed under the governor's current order. It's kind of left up to the town, so it would be allowed. I guess it could be monitored to see if there's large gatherings there. Something that the beach manager could look at, but it is allowed.
So, like football and soccer then would be allowed, is what you're saying? Volleyball and so on.
Yes.
Well, it says it should not be allowed.
Should not be allowed. So the governor leaves it up to the town to decide if that will work out. And I think by them monitoring the area to see if there'd be a large gathering, it could be watched to see how it would work.
But it doesn't say that it's up to the town. It just says organized ball games should not be allowed.
Should not, does not say shall not. So it's up to anything that says should, it defers back to the town, whether the whoever oversees the beach takes any additional steps.
Okay.
Sort of a gray zone. The same way you wouldn't want to use someone else's golf clubs, you probably don't want to be touching the same volleyball or having contact in a soccer game. I mean, there's some common here. So
Well, not without gloves.
there's a lot of latitude here. Okay.
Yeah.
So who will make those calls on a daily fashion? In other words, whether a game should go on, shouldn't go on, or when someone's yelling at somebody else who's 4 feet away and not 12 feet. I mean, who's going to be on site, do you think, that is going to be responsible for this?
Well, we just heard that there's responsible either the beach manager or a person on site. So I think they'll be able to watch it. There are beach conditions set by the selectmen of what can and can't go on the beaches. So overall, they would just look at monitoring this also.
I believe you're the first step in the process of us coming to how this will happen. So if you have strong feelings that a family playing spike ball with a little one ball and with 3 people is not something you're concerned about, that's one thing. But putting 2 or 4 or 6 people on either side of a volleyball net and playing a game with the shared ball is a concern. Then maybe you want to dictate that you're more comfortable with only 4 or less people playing any kind of contact game on the beach. It's hard for us to manage any of that. A lot of our beach space for years has been so taken up by people. I can't envision playing a soccer game on the beach in July. To be honest with you, there's not enough space to allow that to happen. But it would be the lifeguards that would have the concern and would call into their supervisors, who would confer with the park managers, and then a decision would be made on site if this was a good or bad thing.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to just say that we're doing our annual beach testing of the waters this week to make sure that they're ready for Memorial Day. We do this every year of all the salt waters and freshwater areas, swimming areas that we have in town. And this week we'll collect 23 samples at the public saltwater areas and 6 at our freshwater areas, for a total of 29 samples will be taken. And then they'll be taken in cooperation with us and the county health department every week all summer until Labor Day. So the water quality has been good in the beaches in the past, and we don't expect any difference this year coming up.
Let's hope not.
No chance of coronavirus found in the water, right?
No.
Okay.
Won't be viable if it's in there.
Right.
Do you have any other thoughts? I only have one question, and that is what do you think is going to happen between now or Memorial Day and June 16th?
Good question.
To whom are you directing that question, Chairman Bossy?
Anybody?
Anyone want to take it? I guess just concerned about people's safety. That's all I'm concerned about.
Yeah, bullshit.
I like it, Charlie. So anyway, I would say that, I'll let Jeff answer for himself. His perspective is a bit different. This hasn't been, part of what he's been focused on for many years, but there comes a point in time when public health that we clarify, we educate, we post, we communicate, and then people make their own choices. And in my heart of hearts, I want our people to be safe, and I want to know we do everything within our authority to explain and educate the community on what's best for everyone involved. And after that, if they choose to do something that I can't agree with, I can't blame myself, because I did everything I was supposed to. And that's all we're trying to do here.
Well stated. I agree 100% with you. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Charlie, did you want to say anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Good luck tomorrow night with selectmen.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And
Okay.
thank you to my friend and coworker, Jeff Colby. He's done a tremendous job with his staff, and I feel so comfortable working with them because I know that they're consummate professionals and will do the best for the community that we can.
If you have any health issues, anything, the Board of Health is welcomes anything. Okay, we're happy to help out.
Thank you all. We feel that way too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Pat, if you can, and Jeff can still stay on. I know the board wanted also to discuss the
Middle of the Board of Health meeting. What do you need?
on that, Jeff.
Well, Bruce, I missed that. There's lots of noise here. What, you want us to stay on?
Okay.
I'll stay on. I'm on.
Yes, I don't know if you heard me, Mr. Chairman. I know the Board of Health also wanted to discuss the boardwalk tonight at Bass Hole. That's currently closed. It's not part of the beach per se, but the board could look at that. There is social distancing signage that could be added if the board would like to discuss that tonight.
I would say that Mr. Colby has been working on signage that would be very consistent through town, and one of those places we would post would be the boardwalk. And Jeff, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but I know that we do have signage ready to be ordered and put up.
Yeah, we have the signage that I believe has been distributed to some members. I think the chair might have that, and Director Murphy might have that proof. It's been around for about a week. I touched upon it earlier, just on what the language of it is, and that's about keeping the 6-foot distance, wearing a mask if social distancing is not possible, avoiding touching and which handshaking, that type of thing in crowds. That's a pretty typical sign that we'd like to see not only at the beaches but also the parks. And of course, there might be some site-specific signage as well. But that's something that we're certainly comfortable. We're going to order a large number of those signs, and we're comfortable putting those up. Right now, the boardwalk does have some boards across the entrance and signage, and whatever the board and the Board of Selectmen choose to do, we will implement, whether that's to take down and open up the boardwalk or to allow it to be closed for a little bit longer. That's really up to the two boards.
Signage look great. I don't know how the board feels, what they want to do anything about the boardwalk to address it tonight or not. Certainly the selectmen will deal with it tomorrow night. So any feelings on the board members here tonight?
Go ahead and open it up.
That's clear. Anyone else?
No. I just remind the Board of Health that, the board did take a step in closing it April 1st. So if it's something that the board could see opening with the appropriate signage, we probably should vote for that tonight.
It's difficult, Bruce, only in that the board also voted to close the beaches, which we haven't
Right.
either. So it's not all that clear.
Correct.
So just a question whether we want to deal with it tonight. So any other opinions? Charlie certainly on it. Anyone else?
Where was that signage? Is that something that we received?
I don't recall. I certainly did. Two different versions of it I saw.
Yeah, I don't think it was passed on to the board members. I think it was just passed on to myself and DPW, and the selectmen will be looking at it. I think we're waiting to see if there was going to be any final language from the governor that needed to be on a sign, which it wasn't clear that it needed to be. So I think the final signage will be looked at tomorrow by the selectmen and approved at the select meeting, the final wording for the signs that go forward to be made.
Yeah.
Originally, they came from, I think, Barnstable, and I may have suggested one edit, because originally they had about washing your hand frequently or every 20 minutes or for 20 seconds, which seemed ridiculous to put that on the beach. So that was pulled off. The signage looked very good to me.
And I believe that signage will be applicable not only to the Bass Hole Boardwalk, but to the fishing pier at Smuggler's Beach and to the Taylor Bray Farm Boardwalk as well. And consistent, wear a mask. You can't stay 6 feet apart with people passing each other, and they can make a choice if they choose to take that risk or not. But we've posted it clearly and consistently in all 3 places that have similar structures, right? Those 3 boardwalks.
So we could vote or not vote. If someone wants to make a motion, they can make a motion, or we can just let it be. So, any thoughts?
Just let it be.
Okay. This is in reference to the boardwalk, just so everyone's clear. I'll just let it be. Anyone else? Anybody want to vote, or are they okay just be done with this?
I'm okay taking no action.
Okay. So Charlie already expressed his opinion. Fine. So I think we're done with that then. We don't need to vote on it.
So just one question. I mean, is this something that the selectmen could vote to open up on their own? Is that?
Yep, they did. That's what they did with,
Just the same way they do with the beaches. And, this board decided, not to take legal action. So basically the selectmen have taken on themselves to make the decision, which is what we've decided to do. So yeah, they'll address the issue of the boardwalk. I mean, that's pretty straightforward, I think.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to sign off, but anything you need, please contact.
Okay, be well, take care.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
thank you, Pat.
Okay, Jeff.
Well,
We have some time restraints because I think this has to get finished up by 7. So Bruce, on number 6, there's some discussion about human services and budget cuts.
Yeah, and just before we jump to 6, I just want to let you know that the Department of Public Health will be talking tomorrow on going forward with playgrounds, outdoor rec park, camps, and outdoor activities. So there'll be some more discussion about opening those areas starting tomorrow. Restaurants and motels are in phase 2, which will be in several weeks. Probably mid-June, they'll be looked at again by the governor. They're also looking at possibly bringing them back a little sooner. So we'll be keeping a close eye, working with that, and then working with the chamber.
Okay, thank you.
On number 6, on the agenda, if we could call that up, the agenda, Rich. I just wanted to show that part of the discussion tomorrow with the selectmen. Just move that up just a little bit so we can get all the human services there. The potential cuts within the health department budget, in particularly the human services that are being looked at. The selectmen have several layers of budget approvals they're looking at. The budget we have right now for human services is $60,000, which includes, importantly, the food pantry is one of them that you have in your packet. Cape Cod Council Churches, Hands of Hope also offers food and housing assistance and clothing to people. Independence House does a lot with domestic services right now, which is, we've found that there's been a need with everybody still at home. That's a very important program, and the town is one of the biggest users of that program. We also have the nursing service and the Duffy Navigator were free cash grants last year. We added a nursing service for $10,000, and then the Duffy Drug Awareness Recovery Navigator, which was going to go on its 2nd year for $15,000. So I will be listening in and available to the selectmen meeting tomorrow night should they have any questions on these potential cuts. I do believe that possibly in their budget, one of the budget's line items they're looking at or scenarios, they could add money back into various budgets within town. So hopefully they'll consider adding some more back into the human services along with nursing services and the Duffy Recovery Navigator. So I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention.
Bruce, I have a question. So are you saying that right now, all of the unexpended funds are on the cutting block?
Not unexpended, it would be starting July 1st.
The new funding?
The new funding, right. So any of the rest of the year funding we're already under contract with all these four. But for starting July 1st, these could all be potential cuts that will be discussed by the selectmen.
And I have one other question. Why is it that some of these fundies have not expended any money, like Independence House. They were awarded.
Some of them get billed first of the year in January, and we've had a switch over in secretaries and with some of the funding coming in from the way we're set up, but they'll be coming in very shortly.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
we've been in contact with them, so they'll some of them get paid monthly, some of them are quarterly, some are twice a year. So we're working with them on that.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
New or old business, anyone? Okay, as for next meeting then, so we could look after Memorial Day, it could be June 1st or 8th. Anyone have any feelings when we should meet again?
Why don't I get back to you, Mr. Chairman, it might go to the second week in June, depending, that might line up more with the governor's next release.
Okay, we can discuss
I'll
that.
follow
Sure.
that closely. If we need to meet earlier to assist any of the motels or restaurants opening, we could do that.
Okay, fair enough. Good.
Mid-September would be fine with me.
Anyone want to make a motion to adjourn then?
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second,
Okay, all in favor, let's just do it once, say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, everyone. Stay well. Meeting adjourned.
Good night. Stay healthy.